The IDF attacked tanks, radar installations, and outposts left behind by the Assad regime in an effort to prevent problems in the future. Headquarters and weapons depots of the new regime that rules in Damascus were also hit. The El Julani regime, supported by Turkey and Hamas, protested that Israel is trying to shape a new reality in Syria. And meanwhile, the involvement of Iran in the recent bloody massacre of Christians and Alawites in the cities along Syria's western coast has come to light. To the south, the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen are threatening to renew attacks on ships as they sail through the Bab el-Mandab Straits between the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea. This comes as a deadline that the Houthis set for the renewal of humanitarian aid shipments into the Gaza Strip. This deadline has passed. The IDF is also preparing for the possibility that the Houthis will resume missile fire and UAV launches at Israel, and a number of units have been placed on alert. This is including the Arrow air defensive system. And close to home, despite the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, the IDF's covert activity continues in recent days, identifying a growing number of IED-laying cells. This is according to procedure, and the Israeli Air Force carries out strikes against those cells, but Hamas continues to expand and is even taking the explosives out of unexploded IDF munitions to produce new improvised explosive devices to be used against Israel. Meanwhile, no progress has been made in talks with Hamas, and soon it will become clear whether the organization is ready to move forward. However, there is another aspect of the negotiations that have left Israeli officials confused. White House envoy Adam Bochler met separately with Hamas officials this week and emerged from the meeting saying that the proposals raised Hamas senior officials' expectations. And elsewhere, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the negotiations were one-off and produced no results, while Hamas said that they want to exchange releasing all the remaining hostages for a long-term ceasefire, and Israel says it wants all the hostages back, but will not guarantee the end of the war. Hamas also declared that it will never disarm, saying, "We will not give up all our weapons even if a Palestinian state is established." Elsewhere, 50 days have passed since the Operation Iron Wall was launched to thwart terror in northern Samaria. This is a good time to review what we've done and see what remains to be done. There is a great deal of progress that's already been made in this area, but what's next? And further afield, the United States is renewing sanctions on Iran, but Iraq will also suffer because it buys most of its electricity from Iran, and now the United States is saying that this must end, as even this source of revenue for Iran must be shut down as part of the maximum pressure campaign on the Ayatollah regime. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 522 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are acting under the orders of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, I want to invite you to click on the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. You haven't taken part yet? This is your chance to plant your roots in Israel. So be part of Rebuild Israel campaign. Visit the address that you see on the screen and make a difference in the land of Israel today. Now, let's get into the news. And in the last 24 hours, Air Force jets struck north of the Dara government in southern Syria, aiming to destroy weapons of the Assad regime that the rebels have not yet reached. According to reports, the bases that were attacked were previously used by the Assad's Army Brigade 12 and Battalion 89. It was further reported that this is a very wide-scale assault, including outposts and tanks, radars, air detection means, headquarters, sites with weapons, and additional equipment left behind by the Assad regime forces. Meanwhile, the massacres carried out by Abu Muhammad al-Julani's men in the Alawite cities of western Syria in the last week is reinforcing the perception in Israel that these are emerging threats requiring Israel to be preemptively prepared for their development. It is not only the threat posed by the jihadists who seize power and are trying to present a moderate, stable image. There are many forces competing for power and influence in Syria, and there is a strong possibility of more violence as their competing interests clash with each other. There is also the looming threat that Turkey, which has memories of controlling the entire region just 100 years ago as the seat of the Ottoman Empire, might try to re-establish itself again. And another rapidly developing and especially troubling threat is posed by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which may want to operate from Syria against the Israeli border communities in the Golan and in the Galilee. One of the first things that the HDS rebel group did in the days after it deposed the Assad regime in Damascus back in early December was to go into Assad's vast network of prisons and released almost everybody that they found there. This included thousands of people who had been arrested for petty acts of defiance against the regime or for no reason in particular, but it also included many people who were in prison for good reasons, such as being members of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations. Assad kept these guys locked up because he didn't want them causing problems for him by launching attacks against Israel from his territory. But now they are free to do so, and Israel is trying to prevent this. And in recent weeks, the Air Force conducted strikes on weapons depots that the terror organizations managed to hide even from the Syrian regime. Another factor is the Sunni population of southern Syria, many of whom are influenced by ISIS, centered around the city of Dara, where the Sunni revolt against the Assad regime in Damascus began. And additionally, although at this stage Turkish President Erdogan is focusing on northeastern Syria, he might move closer to Israel's border if the situation changes, which raises concerns in Jerusalem. In light of all these threats, Israel intends to try to shape a new reality in the area near its border south of Damascus. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have already declared that Israel will not tolerate the new regime's armed men in Damascus moving south, nor for the Sunni jihadists of the south to roam around armed in the Syrian Golan region, adjacent to the Israeli border. In that area, there are many outposts that the Syrian army abandoned, but they are all filled with weapons and can easily be used by the hostile elements against Israel. Besides warnings that were sent via different channels directly to the regime in Damascus, Israel is aiming to create a defensive array of 3 zones or geographic strips. To explain, Israel divides the border region with Syria into 3 main areas. The buffer zone is a narrow strip extending from the summit of Mount Hermon to the summit of the tri-border area with a permanent IDF presence. Its purpose is to ensure close supervision and prevent hostile infiltration. The security zone is a wider area containing Syrian villages. The IDF only enters it as needed for operational purposes, for example, thwarting weapons smuggling or preventing attacks. This area allows for observation and long-range fire. The sphere of influence stretches eastward to the Damascus Es-Saweda highway. This is including the Druze communities in Jabal el-Druz and Sunni communities that maintain certain ties with Israel. Here, the emphasis is on assistance and protection for the Druze population and maintaining stable regional autonomy. All of this is being done while keeping in mind that the violence earlier this week in the cities along the Syrian coast is believed to be orchestrated by the Iranian elements and supporters of the old Assad regime. According to local sources, the new leadership in Syria tried to arrest war criminals from the Assad area, but encountered a coordinated revolt. The Iranians will exploit anything in order to sow chaos, which allows them to take control of an area that is of strategic importance to them, including jihadist forces and communal rifts. In Syria, there is fear of an escalation that could lead to renewed violence in a country that is still trying to heal and rebuild from over a decade of civil war. Israel is watching the situation closely, with the main priority of protecting our own border from the spillover of chaos and violence. However, Israel would also like to see Syria become a stable, federate state, maybe even some kind of democracy, although that is probably too much to hope for in the near to medium term. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development regarding the situation in Syria. As always, we ask you to help us spread the truth by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and above all, subscribing to this YouTube channel and praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Now, we switch our focus far south to Yemen, where the Iranian-backed Houthis are once again threatening to renew attacks on shippings and possibly also launching more ballistic missiles and drones at us here in Israel. The Israeli Air Force is taking the threats from Yemen very seriously and had decided on a series of steps to increase readiness, including placing several air defense units on high alert. The heightened threat perception stems from a threat that the Houthi leadership made on Monday to immediately take military action after the end of the 4-day period set for lifting the blockade on Gaza, as reported by Reuters. In an official statement, the movement's leadership clarified that they will resume their maritime actions against Israel if the blockade on the Gaza Strip is not lifted. More specifically, last Friday, Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi announced the return of maritime operations against Israeli ships if within 4 days aid is not brought to the Gaza Strip. There was a similar threat last month when they threatened that if the ceasefire in Gaza or Lebanon collapses, missiles will resume from Yemen. However, the previously Houthi attack led to a military response from the United States and Britain, which carried out several rounds of strikes against the organization's launch sites and military infrastructure in Yemen. It is unclear if the threat of more such strike will deter the Houthis, who have shown in the past that they don't care really about the ordinary people of Yemen who suffer so much from their policies. In any case, the IDF emphasizes that it is prepared for every scenario, including confronting threats from multiple arenas simultaneously. An Air Force statement noted that Israel's air defensive systems are the most advanced in the world, and they have proven their effectiveness even against distant threats like those from Yemen. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on developments regarding the Houthis in Yemen. Make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, so that you never miss another update. And speaking of challenges, stemming from this war, Israeli artisans and small businesses have been hit hard by all the disruptions and the attacks. Many are struggling to keep going, and they need your help. With Arza, you can make a real difference. Every season, you'll get a box filled with handcrafted treasures made in Israel, supporting the people who rely on their craft to make a living in this land. And don't just take our word for it. Check out the comments on the videos. People are raving about their Arza boxes, sharing how much they love the beautiful, high-quality items and the deep connection that they feel to Israel. The joy, the gratitude, it's incredible to see the impact. These boxes are selling fast, and every purchase helps. So don't wait. Visit www.arzabox.com and use the code 18TBNIL for 18% off. Support Israel's artisans today. They need your help now more than ever. Now, back to the news, and we're switching our focus to the Gaza Strip. Hamas is preparing for the possibility that the IDF will launch a maneuver in the Gaza Strip in the near future. In recent days, it has increased its defensive preparations, which include, among other things, placing booby traps and improvised explosive devices along roads with the aim of harming IDF forces as they deploy into the area. In recent days, the IDF has detected extensive activities along these lines, and when the bomb-laying squads are observed, the Air Force hits them. Several such strikes have been carried out in just the last 24 hours. Among other places, cells were observed in Sajaiya, in Nusirat, within Gaza City near Salah al-Din Street, in the Nusirat corridor area, as well as in the Rafah City area. The Air Force attacked all these cells, and fatalities amongst them have been reported by the Palestinian media portals. The IDF also states that in the past few days, despite the ceasefire with Hamas, it continues collecting data on potential targets inside Gaza. A military source said, "We are not sitting idly by, rather, we are replenishing our target bank so that the moment we receive the order from the political echelon, the IDF will strike a heavy and painful blow at Hamas." In a related story, footage have been published showing Hamas gunmen collecting unexploded ordnance from IDF air and artillery strikes earlier in the war so that the explosives in them could be used to make improvised explosive devices and rockets. This is a very dangerous process which sometimes ends with the explosive detonating prematurely, killing anyone who is nearby. But Hamas is willing to take the risk in order to restock its own arsenal. The IDF estimates that around 10% of the bombs, missiles, and artillery shells that fired into Gaza during the war did not explode, so there is lots of material for Hamas to try and recover. The bottom line we all need to remember is that Hamas is not taking a break and shows no signs of being ready to quit. They're preparing for another round of fighting, and the IDF has no choice but to make our own preparations for that round as well. So guys, keep spreading the truth, and it's very important that you follow us to help us reach more people. So please hit that subscribe button and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. And speaking of the truth, there is a lot of activity on the diplomatic level to try and prevent another round of fighting in the Gaza Strip, but much of it is only being done so that governments can say that they tried to do something, even though almost everyone knows it won't work. As the Israeli delegation left for the Qatari capital of Doha on Monday, a senior Israeli official told an Israeli newspaper that so far there has been no progress in the contacts with Hamas. We hope that the discussions resuming today will lead to a positive change. Elsewhere, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio landed in Saudi Arabia on Monday and referred to the talks that President Trump's envoy Adam Bochler had with Hamas. According to Rubio, that round of talks was one time only. This comes after Israel expressed its displeasure to the American over this channel, and ultimately Bochler aligned with Trump's position and with the Israeli position, stating that Hamas cannot remain in power in Gaza. Furthermore, if the hostages are not released, no Hamas member will be safe, as Trump threatened in the ultimatum last week, which came after his meeting with hostages who had been released. A political source in Israel said for his part that despite what happened with Bochler, Israel is fully coordinated with the United States, adding that Steve Witkoff is the one leading the main efforts and we are fully coordinated with him. And meanwhile, senior Hamas official Tamir El-Nunu confirmed in a conversation with Reuters that the terror organization's leadership held a number of meetings as part of the rare direct talks taking place between President Trump's team and Hamas figures. In those talks, a new proposal to release living hostages from Hamas captivity without Israeli involvement was raised. It should also be noted that in any case, promises about Hamas possibly agreeing to disarmament are empty rhetoric meant to distract from the main issues. For instance, on Monday, Hamas complained that Israel did not adhere to the gradual withdrawal of IDF forces from the Philadelphia corridor during the first phase, nor did it met the beginning of the withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor on day 42 of the ceasefire agreement. Under the agreement, it was supposed to end on day 50 of the agreement, which was yesterday. The terror organization added, this is a clear violation of the agreement and an open attempt to thwart the agreement and empty it of content. These violations placed the mediators before their responsibility to pressure Israel to fulfill its promises and immediately end the IDF's presence in the Philadelphia corridor. Commitment to the agreement and completing the negotiations are the only ways to bring back the hostages. Any attempt to delay is playing with their fate. This is according to the terrorist organization Hamas. Amidst all of this rhetoric and accusations, Israeli officials have expressed hope that it might be possible to achieve at least one more phase of hostage releases without accepting Hamas's demands for ending the war. However, in Jerusalem they believe that chances are low that Hamas will accept the Witkoff outline, which would have required Hamas to agree to release all the hostages in 2 phases over a 2-month ceasefire. It is also important to remember that only last week United States President Donald Trump set an ultimatum for Hamas, stating that they must release all the hostages now or there will be hell. 5 days after that threat, the president made another similar threat on Monday by reposting an article from an American news site in which commentator Blaney Holt, a former US Air Force officer, said Trump is very serious, and if it doesn't happen, Hamas may meet certain people in our very special forces as the United States is repairing its relationship and alliances with the IDF, and they are ready to go. While all of this is going on, Israel is also taking steps to let Hamas know that we are serious. Despite the fact that the IDF has not returned to fighting in the Gaza Strip, while hostages remain in captivity, not a single truck is entering Gaza carrying any kind of supplies, including fuel. Israel is also preparing additional pressure measures, including cutting off water to the northern part of the Gaza Strip. A political source said, combine that with the pressure from the Americans, both Trump and Witkoff, all the threats and diplomatic pressure in addition to Israel's pressure levers, we hope that will lead to some kind of a breakthrough. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the Gaza arena, and once again, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share our videos on YouTube, and follow us on social media. And most importantly, don't forget to click the subscribe button so that you remain tuned to the truth in real time and know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We conclude today's report with a look at developments in northern Samaria, where we have just crossed the 50-day mark of Operation Iron Walls. It's a good time to take a look at what has been accomplished so far and what still needs to be done. In the Jenin area, a combined effort by the IDF, Shin Bet, and Border Police has resulted in the elimination of 35 terrorists, with 52 others wounded in exchanges of fire with Israeli forces. On our side, 1 IDF soldier was killed and 15 others were wounded. More than 50 buildings were destroyed in the fighting, along with tunnels and bunkers that the terrorists were using to store weapons and prepare attacks. In the city of Tulkarem, 11 terrorists were eliminated and 22 wounded, while our forces had only 1 wounded, and many buildings, tunnels, and bunkers that the terrorists were using have been demolished. Similar activities have taken place in the surrounding areas, and large numbers of terror suspects have been arrested in raids all over the region. The 2 main sectors in northern Samaria are under closure, aiming to put pressure on the terrorists still hiding there and potentially reach them later. The political intelligence and military echelons are still deliberating on the concluding phase of Operation Iron Wall, understanding that it won't be long before the forces deployed in northern Samaria may soon be needed in other areas in Israel and its borders. Therefore, The focus right now is primarily on eliminating or arresting terrorists and, most importantly, reshaping the environment by demolishing terrorist infrastructure and building military outposts inside the cities in order to achieve complete operational control and keeping the terrorist threat at bay to the benefit of both Israelis and Palestinians. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue reporting on every development in Judea and Samaria, and we ask you to keep praying. Please pray for the hostages who are held in the Gaza Strip to safely return to their families in Israel. Continue to pray for the IDF soldiers wherever they are, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Judea and Samaria, in the Gaza Strip, all those preparing for an attack from the Houthis in Yemen against us. Pray for peace of all the people of Israel and all the people of this region that are affected by these terrorist groups. Pray that God will reach them and comfort them. And most importantly, don't forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.